Congressman Adam Schiff of California. He, of course, the ranking member of the Intelligence Committee and a good friend of this broadcast. All right, we're going to get right into it. And I first want to remind our viewers that Judge Kavanaugh has denied the allegation, saying this is a completely false allegation. I've never done anything like what the accuser describes to her or to anyone. Look, we are a nation built on innocent until proven guilty. I'm not asking you to give me a referendum on how the country sees this, but in the hallowed halls of Congress, the whispers there, how is this all being perceived? You heard Senator Hirono saying, and part of the quote is, based on everything she knows about him in terms of how he approaches his cases, his credibility was already questionable in my mind. But he has yet to be questioned on this specific incident in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee. How is this being perceived on Capitol Hill?
Well, I think it's being perceived this way. You just played a clip of Nikki Haley saying that the goal is to get to the truth. That's not really how it's being perceived in terms of what the Republicans are doing. If you want to get to the truth, then you want to hear from other people. You don't want to just present, this is what he says and this is what she says, and we're going to leave it at that. That's not how you get to the truth. And for Lindsey Graham as well to say that's the process you would use in any other forum, that's simply not true. I was a prosecutor for many years. You don't rely on simply the accused and the accuser. In fact, sometimes the most important evidence is in the hands of other people. And you bring them in and you hear what they have to say, or you send investigators out to talk with them. To me, it's telling that this other witness judge is willing to speak publicly, but he's not willing to speak under oath. He should be brought in under oath. We should try to get to the truth, and you simply can't get there if you're not going to allow any external evidence other than these two witnesses. So quite to the contrary, I think of what Nikki Haley is saying, it's quite clear on the Hill. The goal is for the Republicans not to get to the truth. For the Republicans, it's to get to the confirmation, and that's all that seems to matter.
So that is what is jumping out most to you through all of this. It's the politicization of this particular potential criminal incident. I mean, is that what is really foremost in your mind of how this is all playing out?
Well, what's foremost in my mind is there are serious allegations that Judge Kavanaugh committed attempted rape. And are we going to take those allegations seriously? Are we going to try to get to the bottom of this? Or are we simply going to blind ourselves and say that we're okay having someone who may have committed attempted rape on the Supreme Court of the United States for life? That's not okay for me. We should try to find out, did this happen? Now, I have to say, with respect to Mazie Hirono's comments, that to me, that Dr. Ford would step forward and be willing to subject herself to all of this gives what she's saying a great deal of weight and credibility. Would you put yourself through this and your family through it if it wasn't the case, if this didn't happen, if this wasn't such a pivotal and traumatizing event in your life? So I think that has enormous weight and credibility to it, and I think she deserves to be treated respectfully. But I also think that she deserves to have the full facts come out and not simply allow the GOP, in an effort to ramrod this through, rely simply on what Brett Kavanaugh has to say.
I want to pay a little more for you of what Senator Graham said this morning. Here it is.
All I would tell my colleagues, I know you hate Trump. I am going to look at this from a prism of being reasonable and fair to Judge Kavanaugh. Everything I know about Judge Kavanaugh goes against this allegation. I want to listen to Dr. Ford. I feel sorry for her. I think she's being used here. What's
your reaction to the insinuation there from the senator?
Well, I think it's appalling to suggest that, what this woman has gone through and the willingness on her part to testify that she's somehow being used. And it's awfully difficult to stomach anyone who supported keeping a Supreme Court vacancy open for a year when Merrick Garland was nominated to somehow complain about politicization of the process. Look, there are lots of capable lawyers on that Judiciary Committee, and the fact that he doesn't want to ask this witness questions, the fact that in the GOP they haven't put a single woman on the Senate Judiciary Committee, a committee that makes key decisions about a whole range of things, including women's reproductive health. They don't like the optic of this. And what their goal is to try to push this through, try to avoid any further damage before the midterms. But that's really all they care about here. It's not about getting to the truth, and it's not about showing respect for this. It's about avoiding a perception that they're simply not interested in whether Brett Kavanaugh committed attempted rape, that there are more important things in their view, and having this conservative majority in the Supreme Court is all that really matters.
Well, the continuation of this topic certainly will happen, that's for sure. But I do want to turn now to the new reporting from the Washington Post on how the White House is preparing the judge to testify this week. There are three people who are familiar with the deliberations, and they told your colleagues that Kavanaugh grew frustrated when it came to questions that dug into his private life, particularly things about his drinking habits, his sexual proclivities. Kavanaugh declined to answer some questions altogether, saying they were too personal. Does this tell you much about how he appears to be processing the magnitude of all of this and what we should expect when he returns for the Senate panel?
Well, I think we have a pretty good idea what to expect because he is largely testifying already in public through the release of information about his questioning and what he would have to say about this. They clearly want to cabin what the senators can ask Brett Kavanaugh. If you look at some of the quotes, I guess, from Judge's book, Mike Judge's book, that this group in high school drank to such excess that they often blacked out. It seems pertinent to find out whether he was one of the people that was drinking themselves into oblivion, and that might affect his recollection of what he did at this particular party, or even whether he was there. He may not want to answer those questions. Those questions may be uncomfortable, but I can assure you, any questions that he's asked are going to be far less of an issue in terms of comfort level with a single question posed to Dr. Ford. So I think he's going to have to answer the questions. I think the senators on both sides have to figure out what's appropriate, what's relevant, and what will shed light on these very serious allegations.
Speaking of people who have been asked some questions, people that were allegedly there, it has been repeatedly said that whatever happens this week on Capitol Hill is not going to be a criminal trial. But how significant is it to you that the people Dr. Ford said were at that party, either have no knowledge of the incident, nor recollection of the incident, nor even say that they were there? How do you read that?
Well, and I would love to see what they have to say in testimony and be able to see whether they're willing to say the same things under oath, and maybe they are. But they may also say that, frankly, they don't have much of a recollection about what parties they went to, what parties they didn't. They didn't even know potentially Brett Kavanaugh, so how would they know whether he's there? Are they looking at pictures of him now and trying to figure out whether a younger version of Brett Kavanaugh was at the party? Just seeing these little snapshots that the Republicans want to show us isn't really sufficient. If they want to rely on the testimony of these witnesses to corroborate Brett Kavanaugh, they need to bring them in before the Senate or have the FBI interview them, in which case making false statements to the FBI is also a crime. So they seem to want to have it both ways. They don't want any additional witnesses coming in. They don't want the FBI to vet these allegations. But at the same time, they want to put this information out and ask people to believe it.
Let's get to the fallout of the other big headline, and that being the New York Times report about Deputy AG Rosenstein in a meeting last year, suggesting that he secretly recorded the president and then also floating the idea of recruiting cabinet members to invoke the 25th Amendment. Rosenstein, as you know, has issued a statement saying, "I never pursued or authorized recording the president, and any suggestion that I've ever advocated for the removal of the president is absolutely false." What was your reaction when you read this report, and what do you make of Rosenstein's statement there?
Well, when I read this report, it was much like reading this anonymous op-ed, and that is that the substance of the allegations, the heart of the allegations, that this president and his conduct is so erratic, that his actions are so often hostile to the institutions of our government and the rule of law that people had to contemplate an extraordinary remedy like Article 25. People don't seem to quarrel with the substance of that. And that, to me, is the most remarkable thing, that our republic is led by a leader of that kind of dangerously unstable character. In terms of the specifics and the response by Rod Rosenstein, that looks like a statement written by a lawyer with the help of other lawyers.